Support comes from Mosby Building Arts. Sometimes the smaller home projects make the biggest difference. Mosby creates custom spaces that help you love your home even more. For projects big and small, visit callmosby.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. For the rest of the hour, we'd like to share with you the latest episode of St. Louis Public Radio's podcast, Meet Me. Here's host Luis Antonio Perez.
On August 4th, St. Louisans hit the polls to cast their votes in the Missouri primary election. I got up early, and with my microphone and recording kit in hand, I visited polling places in St. Louis County. Specifically, I went to communities that had been drawn into new congressional districts. In a recent episode of Meet Me, we explained how Missouri's new congressional map could shift the state to 7-1 in favor of Republicans. The Kansas City area saw the biggest changes, but congressional boundaries in the St. Louis region shifted too. I was out on Election Day to follow up on a hunch that came out of that episode. And at the very first polling place, our hunch came to pass. I was at the Maryland Heights Government Center. At the very end of a hallway, a multi-purpose room served as the polling place. The space looked like it could have been a college classroom. Light spilled in from a row of high windows on one side, corporate blue tiled carpet, and the walls were a color somewhere between institutional cream and municipal off-white. Long tables were stationed around the perimeter of the room. To the right were the election judges, checking people in, printing out ballots. Along the back and to the left, the tables had 4 chairs on either side, separated by corrugated plastic partitions. The makeshift voting booths made it feel like you were filling out a ballot inside of a high school science fair display. Then, back toward the entrance, sat the ballot scanner, the final stop where votes are actually cast. I was standing at the back, away from the tables and the voting booths, just observing the room. I saw a man stop short of the ballot scanner. He was standing in the center of the room, holding his ballot. He looked lost, trying to catch someone's attention. The poll site manager finally saw and approached him.
So we're going to spoil this one? Okay. Sorry about that. I know, did you get a sample ballot? I know that's...
I couldn't quite hear what they were saying, but they were discussing something about his ballot. I went back outside, started talking with other voters. Then I saw the gentleman who was having trouble with his ballot walk into his car. I'm going to chase this man down because he was having problems. I want to know what they were. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Good luck today. Excuse me, sir. I'm with St. Louis Public Radio. I saw you were having problems in there. Can you talk to me about what happened in there?
Apparently they changed the district and I didn't get notification.
I see. So you're
I didn't get a new voter registration card. They said they sent out sample ballots with the new people from the district.
So which district were you in and which one are you in now?
I was in, Maryland Heights was in 1. So apparently Maryland Heights is not in 1 anymore.
You're in District 2 now.
I guess.
And so what do you got to do?
I can't do nothing about it.
I see. So that's just the ballot. And I think I saw them strike your ballot.
They did.
So does that mean you get to vote or don't get to vote?
I voted.
Okay.
I just didn't vote for the people I didn't know about. I voted on the amendments.
Understood. Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yep.
It turned out this wasn't an isolated problem. Our hunch was right. Another election judge at a different polling place told me they'd encountered the same issue. Voters who did not realize that their district had been changed until they arrived to cast their vote. We heard from voters all day, not just at the polls, but from you, on social media, and in response to postcards we sent to some voters who had been drawn into new congressional districts, asking if they knew their districts had changed. And are you aware that this congressional district has shifted?
It's funny because I really honestly didn't even know until I got the postcard that you guys sent.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that it had been recently redistricted.
I honestly thought it was a mistake because I was pretty sure we were in Ann Wagner's district, and it just wasn't true.
Well, the mail came, and I was just looking at it, and I'm like, wait, these people are not. This is wrong. Somehow, this is not the right ballot for District 1. This is a District 2 ballot.
We were gone quite a bit this summer, and then we got our mail hold and we got our sample ballots, and I was looking at it and I was expecting to see Fred Wellman and Joan Von Dross on there, but it wasn't. It was Bush and Bell. So then I looked into it and found out, oh yes, our district changed as well.
I feel cheated out of my vote. I did not expect to be voting for those candidates. They don't represent me. That's not where I put my effort and my decision-making process and all of that.
And voters we talked to were pretty clear that they did not support mid-decade redistricting.
Just overall and across the country, I find it absolutely reprehensible that state by state we're engaged in these previously never seen before battles of just blatant political posturing for votes for, at the end of the day election results. And it's pretty scary how just the veils have been ripped off and all of the blatant naked vote grabbing, as seems like it's from both sides. I would argue that the Republicans started it first nationwide and there was, the battle back. But yeah, I'm not thrilled with the way our elections are in Missouri at this point.
But now, the first round of elections have happened under the new map. And the legal fight over the map is still ongoing. Will Missouri have to redo the primary election? And remember the Air Bud rule? That too is still a factor in this battle. But now, in a different way. So let's reset and get an update about redistricting and elections in Missouri. I'm Luis Antonio Perez, and this is Meet Me, a project from St. Louis Public Radio about connecting across divides to find a way forward. The divide we're returning to in this episode is how Missouri voting district lines have been redrawn around us for the 2026 midterm election. Now that primaries are over and the November general election lies ahead, we're taking a moment to gather our footing in this complicated environment. In this episode, we'll get an update on the legal battle surrounding redistricting in Missouri and hear from two voters on the same side of the political spectrum, but who are split on how to address what many view as a rigged political system. When we last discussed redistricting in Missouri, we were waiting for Secretary of State Denny Hoskins to decide whether he would certify a referendum for the November ballot that would allow voters to weigh in on the new map. Well, Hoskins did make his decision. He rejected it at 5 p.m. on Election Day. And a county court last week agreed with him. But that's not the end of the legal story. However this shakes out, it needs to be decided before September 8th, the deadline to finalize ballots for the November general election. To help us understand where we are now and what's ahead, I spoke with St. Louis Public Radio politics correspondent Jason Rosenbaum. Jason, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into all the drama around redistricting, I would appreciate if we could just reset a little bit. We talked about this last time, but Article 1 of the Constitution, it requires redistricting every 10 years after the census. Why do we do that? Why do we do redistricting every 10 years?
Because people don't stay in the same place for 10 years and people die, they are born, they move into the state, and the population changes. And prior Supreme Court decisions say that districts have to be as equal as possible. And in order to do that, you have to redraw districts to conform with the population realities of a state.
And we talked about this last time, but it's good for us to just refresh our memories that this redistricting that we're talking about now, it's unique. It's a mid-decade redistricting, and it's happening in Missouri, but it's not only happening in Missouri. Can you talk to us about why this is happening now?
Last year, President Donald Trump pressured Texas to redraw its congressional lines, basically because the Republicans in the U.S. House have a very thin majority, and both Trump and national Republicans felt that redrawing lines in the middle of the decade could provide some sort of buffer to keep the House in 2026. And California retaliated, Missouri retaliated on the Republican side by drawing Kansas City into 3 different congressional districts. It's aimed at ousting Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. He's a Democrat from Kansas City. And since that time, it's almost been a year. I can't believe I'm saying that because it feels like yesterday. Since that's happened, there's been like a year of political action and lawsuits and intrigue and drama. And now I think we're going to reach a conclusion about the fate of this 2025 map.
So it feels like a conclusion is imminent.
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if they heard the case on September 2nd and ruled on September 2nd.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So in early August, Secretary of State Denny Hoskins rejected a November referendum on redistricting, and a court agreed with him. But there are some more legal steps ahead that you're sort of alluding to now in September. Can you give us an update and tell us what's ahead?
Sure. Cole County Judge Daniel Green ruled that the redistricting referendum, which is aimed at overturning the 2025 map, cannot go on the ballot for a litany of reasons. One being that the Missouri Constitution does not specifically say that you can do redistricting referendums on federal lines. And, you know, there were other reasons that he decided, and I'm not trying to say his decision has no value or no merit or no impact, but I think that even people upset with the decision were happy he decided really quickly because of that deadline. And I think that the goal was like make a decision, get it to the Supreme Court, and that's what happened. So I think that this is a part of the process. Even the people on the pro redistricting side would probably concede that this is just a partial victory and it's not the final one until the Supreme Court decides.
And is this part of that? We talked about this last time, the Air Bud rule. Is this aligned with that?
It is, but it's being used by the opponents of the new map.
So remind us what this Air Bud rule is and how there might be a double standard that's happening here.
So I have been talking incessantly about a scene from the classic 1990s film Air Bud. Buddy the dog checks into a game. The opposing coach says, "Hey, a dog can't play basketball." The coach says, "Look in the rule book. There ain't no rule that says a dog can't play basketball." And Buddy the dog then proceeded to win the game.
Let's pause for a moment and get our minds wrapped around the issues here. Referendums and how they work, and the shifting arguments around mid-decade redistricting. First, the referendum process, which is unique to Missouri. Like all states and in the federal government, the legislature proposes, discusses, and passes bills that become laws. But in Missouri, if enough citizens want to propose a law of their own, they can do it with a ballot initiative, like legalizing marijuana. Or, as argued in this case, if Missourians disagree with the law that their legislature has passed, they can petition for a referendum. Like a ballot initiative, a referendum also puts a law up for statewide vote. If voters reject it, then the law is reversed. It's as if the law was never passed in the first place. The Missouri referendum process is like a direct check from the people. It's like saying, "Hey, fellow voters, your elected leaders passed this law. Is this cool? Vote now." And in the Missouri redistricting battle, there were 2 separate issues. The first was whether redrawing lines mid-decade was legal under the Missouri Constitution. The Republican-led state legislature passed a bill last year redrawing the boundaries of congressional districts. Opponents argued that it doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that they could do that. Republicans argued back that it doesn't say they can't redistrict mid-decade, the Air Bud rule. And that's the argument that won in the courts. The second issue is whether a law redrawing congressional districts could be put up for referendum. That's the issue that's still ongoing. And the arguments have reversed. Now, proponents of the new map say that because the Constitution doesn't explicitly say that a congressional map can be put up for referendum, then it can't happen. the argument began earlier this year, it was, well, it doesn't say that we can't, so we can. Now the argument has shifted to, well, it doesn't say that we can, so we can't. Yes,
it's been reversed. And you can call it hypocritical. Sure. I'm sure people are thinking that.
Right.
In defense of Attorney General Hanaway in particular, lawyers often have to try to use the best arguments they can. And I would say attorneys often make contradictory arguments depending on the case. I'm sure that Chuck Hatfield has done that in terms of he was responsible for getting rid of the unlimited system of campaign donations in the 2000s, and then was on a case trying to get rid of a constitutional amendment that put them back in place. It just happens. It doesn't make a lawyer any more or less unethical. It is just part of the job.
And just as a reminder, Chuck Hatfield is the attorney representing people, not politicians.
Correct.
And, I guess, even though it's hard to sort of follow all of this, ultimately, if we're looking at what the result might be, if I ask you to look into your crystal ball and whether it might reveal anything of what the Supreme Court might do based on what it's done in the past.
So I'm not going to predict what the Supreme Court has done. I'm sort of done predicting what the Supreme Court is going to do, but I can tell you that the two different paths they can go down. The first is they could uphold Judge Green's decision, and it basically means you can never do a referendum on a federal redistricting plan ever. They could overturn his decision, and I think that creates a lot of different questions. Because the Missouri Constitution says that anything that's put up for a referendum, that targeted law is suspended, it would stand to reason that the 2025 map never went into effect, and the 2022 map would be in place for the general elections. I'm sure you're going to have many questions about that because we just had a primary on the 2025 map. Right.
Well, my main question, it's a question that I think a lot of folks were asking. I went out and talked to voters, and everyone was very confused about where we were and what's going to happen. And a question that came up, is it just so complicated and so convoluted that for the Supreme Court, the Missouri Supreme Court, to say this map is invalid, it just creates too many problems?
No.
Okay.
Because if they find out that this map from 2025 can be put up for a referendum, they already ruled in that aforementioned Maggart case that the map is suspended. And they were very clear about that. I think that there are open questions since we have already had a primary, whether it is too late to revert back to a prior redistricting plan. Mm-hmm. There is apparently precedent of like an unconstitutional map going into effect because it was too late to change it in a primary cycle. I guess my counter argument to that is a redistricting plan is part of a bill. If a bill never went into effect, then it never existed. And basically, running an election on a map that doesn't exist amounts to an election irregularity. And there are ways to fix election irregularities. You have new elections. That's happened before in recent Missouri history. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy fix. It's not a fix that will be cheap, but there's a remedy for that. So when I hear like it's too late to do it, there's already been an election, I'm sort of like, well, what's to say that Denny Hoskins couldn't dream up his own map, say it's in place, force everybody to do it, and then use the excuse that it's too late to change it because there's too much litigation over it. That just doesn't seem to me to be an argument that there are holes in that argument. I'm not saying that argument won't be upheld by the Supreme Court, but I think that there are rebuttable things to it.
That's STL Politics correspondent Jason Rosenbaum talking with Meet Me host Luis Antonio Perez. We need to take a quick break. When we return, Jason explains how lines in and around St. Louis were redrawn. We'll also hear from two St. Louisans who vote with the same party but are divided between honoring the spirit of fairness and surrendering to a broken political system. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
Let's return to the newest episode of STLPR's podcast, Meet Me. Here's host Luis Antonio Perez.
We're following up on redistricting after the Missouri primary election. Remember, the biggest impact of mid-decade redistricting has been on Kansas City. State Republicans have said openly that the purpose of the Missouri First map is to make it harder for Emanuel Cleaver to win the 5th district, a seat that Cleaver, who is African American, has held for more than 20 years. The district previously encompassed the whole of the Kansas City region, but now the region is split between 3 districts. Cleaver has noted that the new boundaries have reopened wounds from Kansas City's segregated past. Part of the new border is drawn along Troost Avenue, a longtime racial dividing line in Kansas City, one that the city has worked for years to dismantle. Troost is their Delmar. Redistricting has changed the map here in St. Louis, too. Let's go back to our conversation with Jason Rosenbaum to understand how.
So it changes the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd districts, and also changes the 6th district, which has some elements in the very far fringes of the St. Louis area. So in terms of the 1st district, which is held by Congressman Wesley Bell, it basically took in some inner ring suburbs around the city of St. Louis. I don't want to say like the changes were marginal, because they were not. Like, if you take in an entire municipality, that's a lot of people. In terms of the 2nd district, it basically swapped part of St. Charles County for part of Jefferson County and several lightly populated rural counties. I don't think the difference in Republican leaningness is significant enough, for instance, for Ann Wagner to survive if she loses St. Louis County by a wide margin, which she's never done. And then the other major change is that St. Charles County is now all in Bob Onder's 3rd district, which is actually kind of interesting because I've been doing some reporting about how St. Charles County is starting to change politically. It's still a Republican county, but it is becoming what I would classify as more favorable to Democrats in certain places. And I do think that when you pair the entire county of St. Charles with the entire city of Columbia, which has been playfully called the People's Republic of Columbia because it is so democratic, and then just a bunch of rural counties, well, if Democrats do better in those rural counties and they're able to like find a candidate who can win St. Charles County outright, like that district is objectively more competitive for Democrats. And that's, I guess, one of the silver linings in this map. Like, it does create some opportunities for them where they had none before.
Let's get back to talking a little bit more about Denny Hoskins, just so that we can understand this a little better. So when Denny Hoskins rejected the referendum, he did it at the last possible moment, which was on Election Day, primary Election Day. Why did it take him so long to make that decision to whether reject it or
Okay, I can't read Denny Hoskins' mind. He said, I asked him that exact question. He said, well, I wanted to dot every I and cross every T. I'm a CPA. I think he waited to the last minute because in his mind, it was the best strategy to make sure the new map stayed in place for the general election. I'm not making a value judgment on that because I think a Democratic Secretary of State would have done the same thing. Whether you think that's right or wrong or not is up to you.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to share the perspectives from 2 voters with you. So these are both Democratic-leaning voters in St. Louis County, and they both oppose the gerrymandering in Missouri. But they have very different feelings about how the public and the minority party that they support, the Democratic Party, should respond. So first we'll hear from Allison Regier. She lives in Shrewsbury, and she wants legislators to be fair, to avoid creating political maps, and instead find a way to follow the spirit behind the practice of drawing new districts.
I wish they would come up with a wonky solution. I know there are lots of wonky solutions where like the nerds figure out what the optimal representation is. They have some algorithm for it, and then you use that. I wish that's what happened. I want to see people take the high road, and I want to see our democratic institutions protected and rebuilt after they've been torn down. I don't want to see who can play the dirtiest win, and I doubt that anybody wants to see that.
And again, that's Allison Regier, who lives in Shrewsbury. And I also want to play a clip from Mary Straub. She lives in Creve Coeur, and she feels like the redistricting is just the latest example of a shift in the paradigm, and that District 1 is doomed because the goal of all of this is absolute power.
Then there are others of us that grew up, follow the rules, do the right thing, you work hard, everything you'll be rewarded, all this, pardon me, crap. And in the end, it's not true at all. I mean, not that it should be that way, but that is how it is.
So these are two voters who vote the same way, and they have they're appealing to different ideals. I'm wondering, what do you think about what they're saying there?
So I don't think you can do redistricting with an algorithm. I think that redistricting is, by its nature, a political exercise that has political pressures, not only from within a state, but from outside a state. You may not like that reality, but that is the reality. And I also am not very comfortable with the idea of a computer drawing congressional districts if that means that eradicates Black or Latino political power. Because sometimes you have to draw irregularly shaped districts in order to make sure that African Americans or Latinos have some ability to elect people. That's just the way it is. It happens in Illinois. It happens in parts of the South. So I kind of hear what both of those people are saying, and I can understand why it is deeply frustrating for people to have to go through this. I do think, though, that the Democratic response nationally is not to play nice and take the high road. I just think that they've realized they can't do that. A similar thing happens often with campaign finance stuff. Republicans have large donors that affect elections all the time. And just because Democrats want to overhaul the system differently does not mean they're going to stop raising money so they can compete. Mm-hmm. And I think most rational people that follow politics are not going to penalize Democrats for having to play on an even playing field with Republicans for their own strategies. Some will point it out that they're not being intellectually consistent, but I think we've found in the last 10 years that intellectual consistency and a lack of hypocrisy does not cause people to lose elections.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for me too, both personally and even professionally, thinking about how to frame some of these things, where trying to parse out between, well, this is what rules are and this is what people and politicians and all kinds of folks have the right to do. And then there's the spirit of what we believe it's supposed to be like, and trying to just figure out what's the space between it, how they overlap, or if they're totally separate. I personally struggle with that.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why even some Republicans have said that this mid-decade redistricting gambit will ultimately fail. Because maybe they're ahead this cycle, but in 2028, Republicans are going to run out of states to where they can effectively counter that. And ultimately, it is going to be either a wash, or the Democrats are going to win, or Trump, when he leaves office, and his replacement is not going to be popular enough in rural and exurban America for this type of thing to be sustainable. And you will revert back to a pre-2016 world where Democrats start winning in rural districts again. And if that's the case, Republicans in Missouri have just drawn a 4-4 or 5-3 Democratic map.
Right.
And I think that's been the argument against doing this for a long time.
The Missouri Supreme Court will hear the case next Wednesday, September 2nd. The court is expected to make a quick decision ahead of a September 8th deadline when ballots for November must be finalized. And we'll know whether Missouri voters will get to weigh in on the new map through a referendum on the November ballot. If that happens, and if voters reject the map, this story of shifting dividing lines in Missouri will continue. So meet us here to talk about it.
This episode was hosted, produced, written, and mixed by Luis Antonio Perez, with editing support from executive producer Brian Heffernan and supervising editor Alex Hoyer, who also engineered the conversation. Meet Me's engagement producer is Paola Rodriguez, with editorial support from Lara Hamdan. Meet Me's theme music is by Kara and Friends. Special thanks to Daniel Wheaton from the Midwest Newsroom, the Webster Groves Public Library, Jason Rosenbaum, and Fred Ehrlich. Grant support comes from the James S. McDonald Foundation.
Producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Hamden, and my colleague Jessica Rogan and I are your daily hosts of the Gateway newsletter. We meet with the editors in the STLPR newsroom every weekday to bring you the top local stories of the day in a quick and easy 6-minute read by 6 a.m. In an age of overwhelm, it's a refreshing, thoughtful take on the news day, if we do say so ourselves. Fine-tune your daily news habit with the Gateway newsletter. Subscribe at stlpr.org/gateway.